Welcome, everyone, to the 6th episode of Maester Monthly, your favorite pseudo-monthly podcast hosted by the moderators of the Song of Ice and Fire subreddit. Today, we're going to hit on some of our hottest catches and nicest topics from the last month on the subreddit. We're also going to talk about the show, Game of Thrones, which is coming up soon. We're going to hit some special topics, including costumes, cinematography, and music, featuring all sorts of special guests like Kendrick Lamar. No, hold on.
You guys got Kendrick Lamar?
Featuring all sorts of special guests from our roster of moderators. I'm one of your hosts, Michael, better known in these parts as Bookshelfstud.
And I'm another one of your hosts, Eliana, better known in these parts as Glass Table Girl.
I'm JoeMagician, also known as Matt.
I'm one of your...
Fight for it, fight for it, fight for it!
One of your Samuels, Sam R.
Our friend from Down Under, who often joins us. We're also joined by a man who needs no introduction, but is going to make us give him one anyway.
What's up?
BryndenBFish.
What's your name?
I'm Jeff. I'm better known as BryndenBFish. What's up?
And I'm Aaron. I'm here. Hey, okay.
Yeah, first up on subreddit highlights, Eliana, do you have something for us?
Yeah, so I thought there was this really fun post, and the title is Some Dumb Evidence for Someone Being Azor Ahai, and it's short and sweet, leads to some great discussion though. I'll just read out the whole post. User Sorry, let me try this
This
again.
is a hard one.
Oh my god, now that I look at it, how am I going to say this aloud? User Xisuthrus.
Xisuthrus.
User Xisuthrus, spelled Xisuthrus, says, Phaegon is supposedly the son of Elia Martell and Rhaegar Targaryen. The Martells are ethnically Salt Dornish, while the Targaryens have an obvious symbolic association with fire. So, one of Aegon's parents was Salt, while the other was Smoke. See what I'm getting at?
Whoa.
And actually, that someone did suggest, they're like, wait, are you saying that he's barbecue? And someone else says, no, he's a ham. Then the next person says rum ham. And then they talk about Reynolds. The Reynolds family would definitely be Freys. Mm-hmm. The Freys would be the McPoyles. And then, I'm sorry, rum ham, Walder Frey. And
wow.
This all checks out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But aside from that.
Yeah, I thought this was a fun little post. You know, it led to a lot of really great discussion, especially about the ambiguity of prophecy.
The salt and smoke thing is so open. I mean, people justify it with tears, they justify it with the ocean, now they justify it with arbitrary terms for ethnicities. I mean, I think he leaves it wide open. It's true. Yeah.
The question I have about this post is whether, it could be three things. One, it could be true. Two, it could be like a false trail, or like a red herring. Or three, it could be completely unintentional on George's part. We're just kind of picking up at something that George didn't intend, which tends to be, I think, has a lot of currency when it comes to theorizing that. A lot of stuff when I read, I'm like, yeah, I just don't know that George is just that in depth about his books that he's thinking at the level that you're thinking at.
Yeah.
But he could be, obviously. I mean, the symbolism is there, the salt and the smoke portion of it, but do we really think that Aegon's actually Azor Ahai reborn? Young Griff, Aegon the Sixth, probably a Blackfire?
No.
I mean, you think John Connington is?
Well, obviously he is.
Really? Really?
The important thing for this is not whether we think this, it's whether Rhaegar would think this.
I agree.
And he is definitely stupid enough to think this is true. I've been looking a lot into Rhaegar, and he is essentially throwing darts at the board from the time he's young until he dies, trying to figure out how to find the prince that was promised. When he first talks to Aemon, he thinks it's him. He then changes to think it's his children. Then he changes from Elia Martell to Lyanna Stark. He's all over the place. This is completely something that would be in his wheelhouse of a crazy guess he made.
Actually, yeah.
I wonder how many salt and smokes he ran back and forth between over the course of his life, just searching oh, here's the connection. No, that wasn't it. Here it is. It's like, no.
Well, first he thought he was the salt and smoke, so was he just like, my mom's the smoke? Or is my dad the smoke?
Well, it was Summerhall.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right. He thought it was Summerhall.
Well, Aemon thought it was Summerhall.
The tears.
Two of them.
Yeah.
When was the point that Rhaegar actually abandoned the idea that he was Azor Ahai were
It's
born.
not said. It's Aemon only says at some point he became persuaded. So whoever you want to have as that piece of information could be someone like the Ghost of Highheart, could be someone he met, maybe like Marwyn,
or maybe
it's his own independent thought, but it's yeah,
or maybe it's just like him becoming a dad, and he's like, no, I think it's my kid who's real. Maybe it was just his emotions.
It could
right?
be.
Like we have no way of knowing.
I mean, that'd be cool. That's a cool way of doing it.
Well, there's also the prince that was promised stuff that says it's going to come from the line of whoever Rhaegar's like grandparents were.
Yeah, true.
Or whatever. So it has to be like somebody down there.
It has to be, one of them. Going back to, what Jeff was saying about how it's really difficult to understand, there's so many different interpretations for these things. User Robface says, this is actually the point I believe George R. R. Martin is trying to make with every prophecy. He allows multiple interpretations to take place to allow people to come to their own conclusions and have them all be plausible. And he cites some examples such as like Varys' riddle that he poses to Tyrion about all those different answers about power, or when Varys talks about who killed Renly. I mean, we know who killed Renly, but like whatever. And the old Giscari quote about prophecies being like a treacherous woman. And then even Tyrion saying that prophecy is like a half-trained mule. So
yeah, that's sort of a running theme. And the thing with Rhaegar believing that Aegon could be the prince that was promised is it's not just that he thinks it, he believes it. And that's sort of the problem that he makes. And that's kind of what his downfall is. Every single time he thinks he's right. And it like continually goes worse for him going forwards. Until he like accidentally falls into the right answer, which appears to be Jon.
So do we think that like the dragon must have 3 heads plays a role in the Azor Ahai prophecy? Like, did he come to a conclusion later on that it has to be not just one person but 3 people? The meta stuff that we talk about Azor Ahai being possibly several different characters at the same time, fulfilling different portions of the prophecy. Do you think that Rhaegar may have come to that point too, where he's saying I have to have a 3rd head of the dragon, which most likely is Jon Snow, right?
Well, he says it in the House of the Undying prophecy on Shade of the Evening, which we'll get more into later, about like Dany sees somebody who resembles Rhaegar, and he's like, the dragon must have 3 heads, there must be one more.
And technically that's not the Azor Ahai prophecy. That's the prince that was promised.
No, it's not.
Prophecy, which is a Valyrian prophecy versus the R'hllorian prophecy, which I think has its roots in Ahai, right?
Mm-hmm. I believe that's right.
It's hard to say.
No.
It seems to have gone global.
There's the whole idea that Azor Ahai, the prince that was promised, and the last hero are all the same archetype or the same person.
Yeah.
That are diffused across different cultures.
I think that's a theory in universe, though.
Is it a theory in universe?
I thought Aemon did.
Yeah, I thought Aemon had some kind of in-text conflation. Yeah.
Matt, you've been traveling a lot in Samuel's chapters where he's talking with Aemon, right?
Aemon is... Him and Rhaegar were thick as thieves, and what I think the 3 heads of the dragon was originally people thought it meant a Targaryen, because that's their crest. They're looking for a Targaryen. But a problem that we see throughout Aemon's life and Rhaegar's life is they keep making these guesses, and then nothing changes. So they're like, oh, we must have gotten the prophecy wrong, and they try again. So through iteration, they eventually got to, well, maybe 3 heads of the dragon means 3 Targaryens instead of 1. That's what I mean when they're throwing darts. Aemon's on the wall, Rhaegar's down here. Rhaegar's trying to make stuff happen down south and waiting to hear word back from Aemon if anything has changed. It keeps not happening. He keeps experimenting more with his life.
This is why I like the interpretation that it's all actually like stupidly literal, that Dany and her dragons are the actual like 3 heads the dragon must have or whatever. There are literally 3 dragons. Dany is born again amid salt. Like it's all very literal with Dany.
Exactly.
They're gonna morph together and become Mega Dragatron.
They become a Hydra.
There we go.
Or they're all gonna die and then they're gonna become
just like in the Yu-Gi-Oh.
Drift compatible.
Wow.
Oh my god.
Wow.
That just happened.
Yeah.
That's actually what Aemon says when he's close to death. He's like, how could I have been so stupid? It actually was just 3 dragons.
I thought you were gonna say that Aemon said it was just like Yu-Gi-Oh.
Oh no, not that. No, he said on his deathbed when he's letting out all his secrets from his life to Sam, he says that. He's like, I was wrong the entire time.
Yeah, that's true.
And like the pain that it brought him to be wrong that whole time.
Oh, the only other thing was earlier on when you were distinguishing between salt and smoke so much, the way you split them up into 2 really reminded me of the notion of Cartesian dualism.
Oh.
As you may know.
As you may know. As per one of my favorite posts from the last month, by user Cat on the Run, entitled "On Magical Cripples and Cartesian Dualism with a Twist," Sam, you prescient son of a bitch. As you may know, Cartesian dualism refers to the notion that mind and body are distinct and separable entities, and therefore one could exist without the need of the other.
As any child knows.
Yeah, as any Joe Schmo, any Joe Cartesian would know.
That's my new flair.
But yeah, so user Cat on the Run in this criminally under-upvoted post points out that George R. R. Martin's universe in Song of Ice and Fire follows the notion of Cartesian dualism. Wargs and skin changers, their minds can control animals' bodies, as in, the minds and bodies are two dual separate things. Cat on the Run breaks down some of what applying this idea of Cartesian dualism would mean for A Song of Ice and Fire, and begins to, at the end, talk about some interesting conclusions about the others, that they can skin change whites, never minding their deadness, while a regular skin changer would not be able to do that because they would die themselves. They also make an interesting suggestion that whenever a person dies, if a second vessel or second life isn't found, then a person's consciousness leaves their body and fades away, rotting away, but that a weirwood tree might be sort of almost like a storage device, a mass storage device for minds and loose souls floating around. So anyway, I just think this post, first off, it does something that I really like, which is just apply cool concepts from other disciplines and fields and things that aren't A Song of Ice and Fire to A Song of Ice and Fire, but also does have some nice tinfoil at the end. So yeah, what did you guys think? Speaking on that, not A Song of Ice and Fire point, one of the users in the comments, Pirate Robot Ninja of D, brings up that notion of dualism between an entity persisting outside of a body is a recurring theme in George's work, and they point out the great A Song for Leah and the not great Night Flies as other examples of this, which is really neat to see.
Night Flyers, which just got greenlit to be a show from...
Sci-Fi?
I think it's sci-fi.
Sci-fi.
Yeah.
But with no George input, because he has an exclusivity deal with HBO.
I think my favorite part of the post was the point at the end where the others have the ability to do the same thing that the skin changers can do, whereas they can skin change the dead. So it's kind of like a twisted version of what we see Bran doing with ravens and stuff like that, and with as a warg with Summer. And I think that's a cool point, and I think that's something that looks like it'll be explored. I'm actually, Song for Leia is on my list of books to read, so now I'm more interested now to read that.
It's fantastic. Quite short too, just a novella.
Excellent, yeah. I can't pay attention to long books. So.
A Song of Ice and Fire?
I've never read it. So one of the other things this post points out is the link between sick children and the magical abilities that they gain. And they do point out the similarity to the trope of the disability superpower, where the person who is disabled in some way is actually more powerful than everyone else, which has its ups and downs. But no, so Cat on the Run points out that Varamir and Jojen Reed both fall into this category, as well as Bran, obviously, of people who they went through periods of illness when they were young and developed warging and skin-changing powers.
Was Euron sick too when he was young? Because some people have theorized that he got visited by the three-eyed raven too.
Right.
Yeah.
All we know is as a user, Vince That Was Promised, points out in the comments, Euron said, "When I was a boy, I dreamt that I could fly. When I woke, I couldn't, or so the Maester said." Which doesn't mean he was sick. It just means he dreamed of flying. But there's at least the hint, I guess, of a Maester being involved there. Tenuous, but it's there.
You know, the way you specified that user's name makes me cast my eyes suspiciously at the top of this post back to Cat on the Run and really wonder why a user named after a cat is spending so much time analysing skin changing of dogs and direwolves and some such.
Maybe they should be analysing the Cat of the Canals chapter instead.
That's true. Yeah. Or they should be looking at the cat, what is it, Balerion? That roams around King's Landing.
They do point out, actually, Cat on the Run does point out in this post, funny you should mention it, that cats are hard to control because cats are, I quote, awesome and smart.
I mean, so we can't disagree with that.
I do sense some implicit bias in this post. So 9 out of 10. Would have been a 10 out of 10, but for the implicit bias. No, I'm just kidding. Cat on the Run, it was a great post.
If you had been named Dog on the Run, you would have gotten a 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
But
oh my god.
in the first book, we're sort of introduced to the idea that the others are, in fact, like, smarter or better than humans because they sort of just laugh at Waymar Royce. They're like, oh, that's silly human. And as though he's just like a bug or, can't even stand up to them. But here he's talking about more proof, because it wasn't as clear in the show in earlier seasons that the others are in fact sentient and that they are conscious, because in order for them to be able to skin change and mind control other things, they'd have to
be alive themselves.
They have to have some sort of
they'd have
sapient.
to be alive. They'd have to be conscious.
Yeah.
Right.
I think credit to the show though, D&D did use that visual motif of spirals made out of corpse parts to indicate they have some level of intelligence.
Yeah, it's like aliens.
And then the scene where you see them being made from a human.
Yeah, I think that is where
that kind of shoved it in there.
Well, the first scene is just like, it's almost like a peace sign, which I find is kind of funny. It just doesn't have like the split at the end. The spiral comes later during season 2. And then they revisit the spiral again in season 6 with the Children of the Forest flashback stuff.
Perhaps there was some kind of artistic renaissance with the White Walkers during season 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Doesn't Mance call them always the artists?
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Aha.
Always the artists. Is approximately what he sounded like.
No fan art.
Their art is too edgy for me.
It's too blue.
And sort of going back to like how the others use this dualism thing, like it seems like their main Cartesian dualism. It's in all these examples, like even Vermeer, who has like 6 or 7 animals, he can only do one at a time, but we only see a handful of others, and there's a huge amount of whites. It kind of implies that what they're doing is far beyond what any other race or person in universe is doing with their working abilities. They've sort of been they're like a super weapon in a sense, which is what the children said they were made for. They said they were made to essentially to exterminate humans. They're kind of like the Terminators, I guess.
Whoa. So, Matt, do you have anything to bring to the table this month?
I do, and it actually has to do with Cartesian dualism too.
Son of...
The Harpy.
We should make that a new curse. Son of the Harpy.
The post I have for this month is by Nymeria 2015 called Arya Stark, Faceless Men, and the Philosophy of Death. They start with the idea I wrote about a while ago where the Valyrian blood mages may have raised their slaves back to life over and over again as like an economic tool and like sort of like a punishment. We see from from Thoros of Myr with Beric, you can kind of bring them back as many times as you want. Their mind will break eventually, but the bodies will keep coming back. And that was sort of the end of my theory. What Nymeria 2015 here has done is they've shown why the Faceless Men are interested in Arya, using that as an idea that since they came out of the Valyrian, the mines where this was a horrific thing, their goal, according to the poster, is that they're trying to end this from being a possibility. They want to go around and stop the children. They want to stop the others. They want to stop the blood mages from being able to resurrect people, because from what they've seen in the Valyrian mines, it's hell. The people that are being brought back are not happy about it. They would be better off just sort of resting and going into the dark forever. For a lot of people, it's hard to understand what Arya is doing and what the Faceless Men want her for. And it seems like they're training her to be an assassin, but for like what purpose? Why do they need a warg? Why do they want Arya? And this gives an interesting idea for why they're doing that.
I kind of see where they're coming from with this, because it's true. The way the story is presented to Arya when she's told the origin story, it's presented as, death is a gift, right? And we do have all of these undead people starting to wander around, and it might add to the pathos of her character if maybe she's sent to take out like a certain undead Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, for instance, who happens to be her half-brother Jon, in case that wasn't obvious already. There's plenty of room for her to go up against, say, like Cersei and Robert Strong, which would have some impact on her narrative, or Jon, or whoever, these undead characters who are coming more to the fore in the story, I think. So it's a good way to get her back in the mix, for sure.
Well, it links in nicely with the last post we were talking about, where dualism appears to be a thing. Well,
Cartesian
this is like
dualism.
the huge negative, the huge downsides of that being a thing, because people could manipulate it. They could keep bringing you, like, your body back against your will, and you're just sort of stuck in an infinite loop. And it makes sense that there would be a faction in that world who would want to end that if they've been under the wheel of that thing for so long.
They might want to break the wheel.
They would, much like
as
Daenerys.
we say.
That's a really interesting point.
Jesus.
Wow. Yeah. Speaking of Jesus, not speaking.
Would
of
Arya
Jesus,
have
that
been
just seemed
sent
like a good
to
segue.
assassinate? Never mind.
It just seemed like a good segue, and I like the way that this post likens Arya to an angel of death.
Yeah.
Some of the terminology that they use, and it makes sense. You know, as a servant of the many-faced God, one might be associated with some of that religious imagery. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, totally. And they had this whole great section at the end, Life and Death, the Balance of Nature, I think was the title of the section, that just touches on, like, they're like, okay, the Egyptians, Buddhism, Sumeria, they just go through all these historical examples of things that are relevant, which, again, is something I like, that people bring in their outside knowledge and apply it like that.
Between the Cartesian dualism post and this post about the balance of life and death, the sub's really encouraging everyone to take stock of their own lives and the role of death in them lately.
Absolutely.
I don't even...
What the hell?
Kind of dark,
Yeah.
though. Real dark.
Is that a pun, or are you just being depressed?
I think Sam, are you okay? We asked this like every. Are you okay?
I'm just enjoying the sub.
I've got mad tinfoil. I got fun tinfoil. Okay. So if the Faceless Men are supposed to be giving the gift, and Tyrion is supposed to be the gift, then is Tyrion going to turn to the dark side and become like the angel of death, the villain of the story?
Wow.
Nobody? Okay.
I don't understand. How is Tyrion giving the gift?
He walked up and he was like, I am the gift in the show.
I am the gift.
I am the gift.
It's actually pronounced
yeah.
gift.
I am the GIF.
Shift. High quality shift.
I am your high quality GIF, Danny.
You know what is a good Tyrion gift in real life? The wit and wisdom of Tyrion Lannister.
Perfect.
Oh, only $19.99 on BarnesandNoble.com.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Bag of coal.
This podcast sponsored by Blue Apron.
But also bringing it back to the religious imagery of angels of death, etc. There's that whole chapter where she goes by the name Mercy, and there is also an angel of mercy whose name... Wait, who wants to guess what his name is? You should know this. You should know this,
Kago
Michael.
Corpse Killer.
Kago Corpse Killer. There's Azor Ahai.
It's
Michael.
It's Michael.
It's Michael.
It's Michael.
Hey.
Oh! Wow!
All right. Saint Michael the Arya Angel. Am I right? That was a joke for all my...
So many puns.
I think the angel of mercy is named Jeff because he saved a person from a ban earlier this week.
Oh. That's a little bit of background knowledge for you listeners out there.
What?
Guys, did we
who'd
fail?
you stop from
User-
being banned?
Did we fail this post?
I'm still going on this post.
Did we what?
Did we fail this post? I think this post failed us.
Good lord. In the comments, user Putanesca621 asks the obvious question that I think we're all thinking: does this include Lady Stoneheart in terms of Arya killing the undead?
Yes.
Because that could also be, as I was talking about Jon Snow and Cersei, seems like a possibility, right? An avenue for Arya.
I was thinking about this earlier this week. We were talking about expanding a cut segment from last episode about resurrection, and I think it's really great if Arya ends up being the one to kill Stoneheart. I know you're shaking your head, but I'm not going to get into it now. But this is great. Trust me, it's freaking great, and you're gonna love it, babe. Just wait.
I'll take your word for it.
Everyone stay tuned for next month, August. We're planning to do the rotating topic about resurrection.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
This idea could totally die, but
It's coming
Oh.
back.
We're gonna bring it back if it does.
we're bringing sexy back.
You're gonna like the way you look. I guarantee it.
up next? Aaron, you've talked a lot of shit. No, I'm just kidding. Aaron, do you have any? Aaron, do you have any posts you want to throw on the table this month?
I do, and it's called "I Would Bet Money Shade of the Evening Tree Petrifies." It's some fresher tinfoil. We haven't had that much tinfoil in a while. It's an explanation for something that is currently unexplained.
I'm pretty sure this post was by crowfoodsdaughter.
It could be. It could be. We really don't know, but it could be. So the post starts out bringing up some stuff that's been out here for quite a long time, that Shade of the Evening trees and werewoods are the exact opposite of each other. So werewood trees, you all know they grow in Westeros, and they're very old, and they lead to like visions into the past. Then you have Shade of the Evening trees, which are introduced over in Karth, that the warlocks use, and they produce a different type of dream. They're similar in certain ways and very much different in others. Werewoods are white with red leaves. Shade of the Evening trees are black with blue leaves. Both trees have different kinds of sap, which give different types of dreams. White and red werewood paste that's creamy and milky, and then you have Shade of the Evening, which is like black and inky, and the two dreams are a bit different. You have the dreams of the Greenseer through the werewoods, which are very clear and precise, and then you have the dreams of Shade of the Evening, which are all like contorted and metaphorical. It's really like some kind of trippy drug trip where everything's like very surreal. Some of the things like Dany, when she's on it, she sees Rhaego as if he was some sort of conqueror, but he's deceased at this point. And some very weird stuff that it's hard to make out exactly what she's looking at. But when you look at Bran, in all of his dreams, they're all very clear and precise, and he can see directly back into the past at certain points.
Going off the Shade of the Evening stuff, A, it's the spice from Dune. B, undying scenes for the large part seem literal, but they're also mixed with symbolic. And in The Forsaken, almost all the visions we get through Aeron Greyjoy are symbolic.
What I really liked about this post is nobody has brought this up before, that despite the parallels between what a werewood tree is and a Shade of the Evening tree, we know that werewood trees end up petrifying into like a stone element. And some people say that the Naga's bones over on Old Wick are actually petrified werewoods from like an ancient ship that had like beached over there and carried the Ironborn to that location. The ribs that are sticking up aren't like some great sea beast, but like part of the ship. And so that's the theory. But there are also general like werewood stone, ancient trees and stuff around. And so this post was saying like, hey, if this would happen to Shade of the Evening trees, then it would petrify into blackstone.
But like, what do you think about Preston Jacobs brings up a good point. Tree petrification takes millions of years, not thousands, so...
Well, I think you just said it, because if werewood trees take millions of years or thousands of years, as is said in A Feast for Crows about the blackwood tree, then Shade of the Evening trees would not. It would be over really quickly. The trees would, get spent after a short period of time. I don't necessarily agree that it turns into black stone, because, again, we're going with the opposites here. And so that doesn't explain certain other things, because some people brought up in the comments the idea that it turns into the oily black stone, but that doesn't really necessarily make sense, because then why would it be oily? Mm-hmm. If you're going with the polar opposites and everything of a werewood tree is the opposite of a Shade of the Evening tree, then you would expect it not to petrify. It should melt. The tree should melt or do something very strange. And if that happens, it could go into the ground and mix with other stone and then become shale of the evening. Wow. And then you have a reason for the oily black stone. And it's not that interesting on its own, but if you figure in that it has properties of a decayed and deceased Shade of the Evening tree that is liquefied, it can help explain certain things in the story. It doesn't really change that much, but it would make it a bit more interesting and a bit more magical in the Song of Ice and Fire sense. And that's that at the base of the High Tower in Old Town, there's oily black stone. And in the story, Leighton Hightower, the lord of the second most powerful house in the Reach, he's holed up there, and we have no idea why he's there. And we have this idea that he's sitting at the top of the High Tower and he's reading all these mysterious books. But I think it would be a bit more creepy and eerie if Sam opened up the door to the high tower and he walked in there to go find Leighton, and he discovers he's like actually at the base and his hands are like all oily and black because he's been sitting there for years as like a drug addict, just rubbing the stone, like getting all these crazy dreams.
Sometimes you do just got to rub the stone.
Oh, boy.
And that would also fit in with something earlier on. Somebody in the book hypothesized maybe he'll raise an army from the deeps. So I don't know, maybe he's gaining magical properties because he's absolutely nuts. And this is a way that, you can tie it all together.
Excellent.
Maybe Euron wants to go there so he can drink Shade of the Evening and rub the stone.
Gotta rub that stone out.
Pay his respects to the stone.
Yeah. It's rock hard.
I feel like you set this whole thing up just to make the Shale of the Evening. Oh.
No, I really liked it. I thought that does it change anything in the story? No. Is it a clear and I think logical explanation for something that exists that is currently unexplained? Yeah. And it's not like tinfoil that's doing like a crazy twist. It's just explaining something. I think this post fits in just fine because we're talking about the mind and body, Cartesian dualism, but we're talking about also about the opposites of the mind and body. So it's like Cartesian quadrism.
Yes, we are.
I think it's good tinfoil in these dark, trying tinfoil times where everything seems like it's subtle nuance.
Absolutely. I feel like the Shade of the Evening trees, they show up in A Clash of Kings, and then you kind of expect to see these black trees with blue, like this. It seems important, is what I'm saying, and they never pop up again. So it would make sense if this was somehow, they were the oily black stone, or at least somehow popping up elsewhere in the world, and we just didn't realize it yet, because they seem important, right? It seems like if the polar opposite of a weirwood, if a weirwood's that important, then it should be equally important for the polar opposite, right?
The weirwood lets you see into the past, Shade of the Evening lets you see into the future.
Oh my gosh!
And the past, too.
Well, Shade of the Evening is like, it can torch visions and stuff.
What color dreams would the Shade of the Evening give you? Purple dreams?
But like the weirwood pace. The weirwood pace lets you see into the past, and the green dreams let you see into the future, but the pace doesn't necessarily...
Well, weirwood pace binds you to the weirwood tree. Shade of the Evening is more like a mobile device. Again, it's like the opposite. You can have these dreams anywhere, but if you're in the weirwood network, you're stuck in like one place.
Going back to the poets, I think there's also some proof of this in the House of the Undying, where like it's the blue heart and the Undying are like, they appear to be preserved by this stuff. Maybe when a human drinks it, they eventually turn to like stone with a consciousness, more or less.
Medusa.
Oh.
Yeah, something like that. Like, because that's what it seems like it's going. Well, the Undying move, but not really. Isn't that? I can never tell if that's in Dany's head or not.
It's really hard to tell because she and her point of view are on the drug at the time.
Yeah.
They move to her.
But is that part of her thing?
No, they definitely move to her because when she comes to, they're like trying to eat her.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
my
okay.
take on it.
They move enough to try to eat her.
Yeah.
Or maybe they're just going to give her a hug and she's having a bad trip.
Also possible. Jeff, do you have any thoughts? You haven't said anything in a long time.
I really don't have a lot of thoughts about this post because this isn't really in my wheelhouse necessarily and things to think about A Song of Ice and Fire, but it's interesting. I mean, I like the possible connection between
It's a hot take.
Shade of the Evening and weirwood trees, and that's really all I can say about it.
Jeff is just a fascinated bystander in this.
Oh my god, where have we seen trees melting? Because that's a very strange thing to even talk about. And Eliana, you brought up time. There's that famous painting of the tree that has the melting clocks in it and stuff.
Salvador Dali.
Salvador Dali. Persistence of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's your inspiration.
Drugs.
Yeah, drugs.
I've got another hot take for it. In Essos, there's actually a native population of people that are sort of like children of the forest. They're from the kingdom of Ithaquevron. They're called the Woodwalkers, and they walk around haunted forests. The Dothraki are too scared to go nearby, and they carve faces into the trees. Maybe these are regional versions of the weirwood. And while the ones in Westeros tend to white ones, the ones in Essos tend to the black trees. And it's just they got separated a while ago or something like that.
Shade of the Evening is the Alolan Marowak.
What?
2 different paths formed in a yellow wood, and I took the tree less traveled.
What poet was that, Jeff?
You're going to live that shit down.
Who wrote that?
I believe that was Lord Byron.
Karth used to be a much bigger place. They apparently used to have trees and everything. It's possible they cut down all the shade evening trees throughout most of Essos, fighting those children of the forest in the long past.
The Undying are in a tower and they go up, whereas the Weirwood and Bloodraven are underground.
Although actually the House of the Undying in the book is just a low building. Yeah.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. Although she does go upstairs in the low building, so it's,
They go sideways.
Right. Yeah.
That's the point. That's why it's magic.
It's a low building. They changed that for the show.
That's why it's magics.
But the stairs are impossible. She always goes up to the right, and it's like a 1-story building. It's impossible.
I think the real stairs were the friends she made along the way.
Do you mean the Undying who she killed?
So Sam, what post do you have to bring us this month?
Well, it's another post so transformative it makes you feel like you're on Shade of the Evening. By the always articulate lemonpeely. It's titled Let's Talk About Unreliable Narrators. In this post, lemonpeely does a great examination of the third-person, limited, omniscient type of viewpoints that George uses in the series, and they look at the level of unreliable narration George uses in these viewpoints. And they use examples like Arya misremembering the name of Joffrey's sword, child characters not fully comprehending what they're witnessing, like when Bran thought the Lannister siblings were wrestling, non-Dornish characters viewing Dorne in stereotypical ways, and then when we get the actual Dornish viewpoints, those stereotypes falling apart as we realize the complexities of the actual culture. And things like Arya's chapters in the books 4 and 5, where she starts to really subsume herself into these different identities, and the narratives and the titles of the chapters not just being Arya anymore reflect that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But with all that said, they then frame this all in the perspective of there's a great difference between unreliable narration in the sense of viewing the world through, this is their words, a specific set of biases and conceptions that have been ingrained in you since birth, and then they contrast that to actively lying to yourself, as some theory crafters might do when making their theories, thinking a character is wholesale, deceiving themselves, and there's information George is completely hiding away from this in some way. Mm-hmm. And lemonpeely kind of says that's not really the way George is telling his stories, and that while there's unreliable narration, there's no flat-out lies from George. It's just how the characters themselves perceive the world through their context. And then the fact we have multiple point of views allows us to piece together what's real and what's consistent anyway.
So I agree so much with lemonpeely in this post because, yeah, I think people do take the unreliable narrator idea and just completely misapply it to say, oh, well, this person just could have been hallucinating the whole time. There's a great post from several months ago that no one else seems to like as much as I do, which I think was partially satirical, but suggested that the dragons could just be hallucinations because only Daenerys and Quentyn have seen them. Which, I'll send you it. It's
great.
You did?
It's a great post.
I thought we featured it.
We wanted to, and by we, I mean me. But that's the taking the unreliable narrator to its illogical, ridiculous extreme, where, to a certain extent, you have to take some things at face value that George R. Martin, as the author, is presenting to us through this character. I gotta say, I really liked in this post how they talk about Tyrion and his chain at the Blackwater, and how it is more ambiguous than just black and white, oh, Tyrion saved the day and no one gives him credit. It's like, yeah, Tyrion did a good job, but he didn't single-handedly save the day. He's not the sole savior of King's Landing that he kind of thinks of himself as eventually.
I mean, they were about to lose the battle of the Blackwater, and if Tywin and the Tyrells hadn't showed up.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, they were still going to lose regardless. I mean, like, even Tyrion's, the chain itself, it created the bridge so that Stannis' troops could cross the Blackwater Rush and then start hitting the gates of King's Landing. So it had the second order effect of creating the ability for Stannis to actually win the battle because he had an ability to cross his troops into the other side of the Blackwater.
That's a great point. Yeah, exactly.
I think that to some extent we're supposed to interpret it as at least somewhat heroic because it's framed against one of Sansa's chapters, right? Where she sees Lancel scolding Cersei for taking Joffrey off the battlefield and is saying to Cersei, he's like, you can't take Joffrey off the battlefield. He's our leader. He's our king. If people see that he's not there, they're all going to lose morale and they're all going to be like, well, if he's not fighting, why should we? And so Tyrion, seeing that he's like one of the leaders in terms of like being a nobleman and a Lannister, in leading that charge and going to battle with everyone sort of gets portrayed heroically in that sense.
Yeah, like if you're playing Total War, medieval warfare, like you can't take your commander off the battlefield. You lose all your morale and all your troops rout.
Exactly. I think that's what George R. Martin based that off of.
Jeff, we still have to play. I challenged you a long time ago to play in
I'm down.
Total War.
I'm always down to play.
We should live stream it on Twitch.
Do it. You should.
Do it.
I'll shoutcast
Jesus.
it. It'll be great.
We could bring Ollie in too because he plays.
I did not know that. You mean the boy from the Castle Black?
Yes, the greatest archer in the North.
He's come back.
Great Dave Hill's resurrected him. The best story move the show could do.
Nah, Ollie is one of our fellow mods. That's his name.
Yeah.
Yes.
One of the cool things, though, is that there are legitimate unreliable narrators in A Song of Ice and Fire.
Yes.
One of them being Sansa and the Unkiss with Sandor Clegane, also featured in the Battle of the Blackwater. George has put this specifically as a moment of unreliable narration, which to me implies that it didn't happen anywhere besides Sansa's head, but it does have an impact on Sansa's characterization as she's pushed forward through A Storm of Swords and into A Feast for Crows and The Winds of Winter. Because she does dwell on that moment multiple times as the narrative pushes forward.
And lemonpeely does say that, like, her very first line is, so George R. Martin has confirmed, and the word confirmed is highlighted as that link to Sansa misremembering what is now colloquially called the Unkiss by fans. So George R. Martin has confirmed that his characters are unreliable narrators. As, like Sam was saying, they might misremember things in their memory, like looking back on things, as science has shown that the more we replay a memory and the more we think about it and revisit it, the more we distort that memory. But along with that, as they say the way Tyrion's biases about Shae cause him to misinterpret things, but that the actual events that happen and when they happen and are trustworthy and accurate.
Yeah. Right, and they're trustworthy and accurate to the character. Tyrion believes that Shae loves him, even though it's not accurate. It's an inaccurate...
What they're saying is that Shae's actions and the way she's actually acting, the things that we see Shae do, the things we see Shae say, are accurate. It's Tyrion's interpretations that are
like
inaccurate.
Sansa misremembers, but the actual scene where the Unkiss would have happened, we don't get the Unkiss described to us. And then George later laughing, going, hey, that never happened.
Right, exactly. We see what really happened, and then it's up to characters to misinterpret that later on. But the actual, like, real-time play-by-play of events that we get is at least accurate up to the character's interpretation. Yeah, I mean, I think that's what lemonpeely's really getting at, is, like, there's all this memory and all that kind of stuff that all falls apart, but ultimately, when we're shown on the page that something is happening, something different is not happening. When Quentyn is set on fire, Quentyn is not set on fire. You know what I mean?
Is he dead?
Right.
Read Quentin's death until you like it.
Lemonpeely also brings up one of the most hotly debated examples of this. It's Dany with the House with the Red Door and the Lemon Tree, where we never actually see that happen live. She's only remembering things from many years ago, and she's replaying it with her mind. Nobody else has any confirmation of any of these details being correct. It's just her. And it's a question that he raises with Sansa that you can apply here. It's like, what is Dany actually remembering? Is this like multiple places? That kind of thing?
Kind of ties into Harrenhal, like we talked in the last episode, and Robert's Rebellion in general, in that since George isn't doing any actual prequel, it's all memory. So it's all susceptible to the unreliable narration of characters like Barristan and John Connington recalling it.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. There's a user in the thread who makes a great point that there are lies of omission in the series. Ned not thinking about Jon's parentage. That's not Ned thinking, oh yes, I remember when I fathered Ned on this person, and then that's just a lie. It's Ned's point of view just not touching specifically on the issue of Jon's parentage fact by fact. So there are those kind of lies by omission in the point of view, but again, that's all memory stuff. It's not real-time live events. Yeah.
Live.
Yeah, exactly.
The other omission thing also is Tyrion not thinking about the chain in a way that George wrote it to kind of obscure what Tyrion is doing in building the great chain that stretches across Blackwater Bay.
Yeah.
It's a weird way, like when you look at it in retrospect and after doing a couple rereads, you look and you're like, you would think that Tyrion, in his own mind, would have been thinking about this chain that was going to stretch across Blackwater Bay and was going to keep Stannis' ships in, but he wanted to maintain both the narrative tension and the surprise factor that comes when the chain comes forward. But it is kind of a weird way that George does it. I don't mind it necessarily because it is a cool reveal in A Clash of Kings when the chain doesn't go up at all until after the wildfire explodes and it traps most of Stannis' fleet inside Blackwater Bay.
Totally. And that does do that a lot with narrative tension, where it's like the rule of writing, right? If you ever spell out a plan on the page for the characters, that plan has to go wrong. And if you don't see a plan spelled out on the page and you just see it play out in real time, it's going to go pretty well for the characters. I mean, that is fairly true. Like with Theon's escape from A Dance with Dragons with the Spear Wives. I mean, he and Jane do end up jumping off the wall. And what we get is like him sitting down with the Spear Wives and going, okay, here's the plan. And then we cut to the plan in action. So yeah, there's that element of narrative tension, but that's not really an unreliable narrator. I think some people might get the two confused.
Hey, Eliana, what would have been better than Tyrion just making one chain on the Blackwater?
I don't know. I feel like just one chain isn't enough.
One chain's pretty good.
Maybe he needed 2 chains.
Oh my god.
Are we allowed to put in clips?
Thank you, Aaron, for setting me up.
I think maybe the perfect example of what we're talking about is a line that a lot of people have based an entire huge theory about, and it's Barristan remembering Harrenhal and Ashara Dane. And there's the line where he says, and she looked to Stark, and then he gets interrupted, and you don't know which Stark. You don't know if and what we're talking about with Tyrion and Shay, it's his interpretation. We don't really know what he saw. We don't know which Stark he's talking.
It's Lyanna.
Ashara could have been talking to Benjen or Lyanna.
It's Lyanna.
It's Lyanna. It's definitely Lyanna. There's unreliable memory there. There's also interpretation by Barristan. And there's just the length. It was like 15 years ago. Is his memory of that event even correct anymore? It's like a perfect storm of all these ideas in one.
That's cool.
Yeah. A perfect storm of swords. Let's...
Was that in the Dance with Dragons?
Finally, let's have our good friend Jeff. What do you have to bring to the table today?
So my post is...
Jeff is our friend?
If
quote
really
unquote
wanted
friend,
to call me that.
Jeff.
Jeff exists.
I'm there. So the post that I chose for this month is a simple explanation why Show Dorne was so bad.
Oh.
And it's 3 lines. The post is, I think we can all agree that Dorne in the show is awful. Agree? Everybody agrees with that,
We're all
right?
nodding, yeah.
Everyone.
Sure. There's a simple reason why the Dorne storyline from the books was scrapped, though. It's intrinsically intertwined with the Fagon storyline. Once the decision was made not to include Aegon, Dorne had to be overhauled. And since Dorne couldn't be taken out completely because of Oberyn and Myrcella, you get what you get for better or worse. So this post I liked because it's super short, but I think it really speaks to a big portion of why Dorne fails. Dorne fails at a narrative level in the books, rather in the show, because you don't have the Dorne Martell, should I or should I not support Aegon, which comes up in the Winds of Winter, where he ends up sending Arya north to the Stormlands to try and see if Aegon is legit or not. But at the same time, he also has the Quentyn plot in mind as well, where he's sending Quentyn after Daenerys Targaryen to bring her back to Westeros, land in Dorne, and then get his vengeance on the Iron Throne. Without Aegon there and that tension between whether Dorne is going to support his son or his daughter, because by the end of A Dance of Dragons and early into the Winds of Winter, he has no idea that Quentyn has died.
Which he has.
Dead.
Which he has, absolutely has died. He's so totally dead. But he doesn't know that. He has no idea that Quentyn is dead, and that's factors in to the consideration because he is thinking about that as he dispatches Arianne up to the Stormlands. Because if Arianne comes back and says we should support this dragon, Dorne Martell is going to have a hell of a choice thinking, well, my son is still out there. If I support Aegon, I'm basically setting my son aside as king of Westeros and putting my daughter up as the queen of Westeros. But he's also has this thing where he starts to think that his son might be dead. Without that sort of narrative impulse behind the work, Dorne really doesn't work. And I sort of understand why George and both Brian Cogman, who I believe is the person who wanted Dorne to be in the show, wanted Dorne to be in the show. You had to see the fallout and the ramifications of the death of Oberyn Martell. You can't have this massive character come onto the page and then sunset at the end of season 4 and not see the outcome or what ends up happening there. But it does actually not work without Aegon in the mix, if that makes sense.
Well, in some ways you could do it in a different fashion. Like, it's not necessarily that Dorne has to be bad because Aegon is gone, but it gets much more difficult to create a new story that fits in. That what they went with is just like buddy comedy adventure story. It didn't elevate it in a way that made up for the lack of not having Aegon.
Would you all agree it was a matter of you want the fake Aegon, but you need the buddy comedy?
What if they had gotten around, if people thought that the Fagon thing was too complicated, suddenly bringing in another character, etc., would you have agreed to a change where maybe Trystane played fake Aegon as opposed to bringing in a whole young Griff?
Yes.
I think that would work. That would have worked in the show's context. But the other thing that's also running in the narrative too is this whole concept that Doran's need for vengeance is really misguided. By cutting out that portion too, which does factor in with the Aegon storyline, because in A Dance with Dragons, Doran Martell dispatches the Sand Snakes out to various tasks. He sends Nymeria and
Tyene.
He sends Nymeria and Tyene up to King's Landing and tells them, word might count things that will need to be done, and I will send you word. And he sends Obara after Darkstar. And then you have Ilaria there, who was witness to Oberyn Martell's death, who has suffered a lot, saying, why are we, like, all these people that you wanted vengeance against are dead, and that you're still pursuing this vengeance on people that are already dead. So you're pursuing it against the people who are of only tertiary culpability, if any at all, in the death of Elia Martell and her children back in Robert's Rebellion. That dynamic was also cut out from the show, and that really, really kind of, it soured me on the show for sure, or the show's treatment of Dorne.
It's definitely one of the larger moments in the books that shows an anti-revenge perspective, which I think the show is sorely lacking and went with the exact opposite.
Absolutely.
So you didn't like the message, weak men will never rule Dorne again?
Oh my god.
I think that's just so fascinating, the quick turn.
One of the things that I was thinking of was, like, it would be neat if Marcella was, like, picking through Trystane's hair or something, and she discovered, like, that he had blonde roots or something, and, like, that was, like, the kind of the reveal of, like, hey, this person isn't really supposed to be the person that he's supposed to be, because, like, Dorne had been dyeing his hair for so long to keep him, like, hidden or something. Trystane got captured, and he had on, like, the Queenmaker plot or whatever they would have done in the show, because, like, Trystane would have been the instigator of it, and so he would have been locked away, and his hair wouldn't have been continuously dyed. And I think that would have been a better way to tie in, like, hey, here's another Targaryen, fake Targaryen, like, plot of things.
So you wanted Doran to die a different way.
Nice.
Oh, wow.
There was a really interesting point that this user, I don't know if it's Craw68 or CRA68, points out. So there's this really great point that user Craw68 points out in this post. And they talk about how Alexander Siddig, who plays Doran Martell, actually claims that his character had a far bigger role, and he was surprised when those scenes weren't shot, and that the entire focus of the storyline went to Ilaria and the Sand Snakes. Yeah, so he, like, Siddig apparently confirmed in some interviews that there were massive rewrites behind the scenes that made no sense, as Craw68 says, the couple of sources. And apparently he was, like, paid for 4 episodes, but did a brief appearance in 1.
It's pretty easy to see that they did not know that he was cast yet for this role when it was written, because he is so minor in that storyline. And so it's like when they got the opportunity to sign him up, that they were just like, okay, let's get them for multiple seasons just in case. And it turns out, well, they weren't going to use those extra episodes.
Yeah, perhaps that was like the original vision of why Cogman pushed so hard to continue including Dorne in the show. Sam, do you have an eye roll for me, or like?
Since he died so quick, maybe this time you could say Alexander Siddig got the quickening.
Sorry, what?
DS9 joke,
Wow.
Nobody gets it. Okay.
Oh my god.
Somebody out there listening is gonna get it.
Swing and a miss. Ooh.
Awesome.
They'll laugh really
Someone
hard
out
too.
there is
Someone
chortling
out
really hard right now.
there.
I wish you guys could have seen the blank faces across our Skype call as that went out.
Anyway, I think it's fascinating, the whole thing where Dorne just completely transforms between season 5 and season 6, because or honestly, the season 5 episode 10 seems to be different from the rest of Dorne season 5. Like, the writer's room on Dorne must have just been
Non-existent.
I don't know. I would pay good money to watch live footage of the writer's room, unless it was just an empty room.
I would watch The Room.
An empty.
I'll watch The Room.
It was a Markov chain
You would
bot.
watch The Room over the writer's room of Dorne. No, it's
Wow.
so, I don't know. It's so baffling, because it really does seem like there must have been all these conversations that resulted in just really bad execution.
Well, it's also because they didn't have the budget to allocate to it, and they weren't really sure at this point, because this was the first time they were shooting in Spain, and they weren't really sure.
And that is why it was a dumb decision to go to the Alcazar Palace in Spain for Dorne. They should have just had a soundstage and allocated more budget to the other elements of the story, because they spent a ton of money on that national
They
park.
seem so impressed with it, though.
It came to nothing.
It was
basically.
beautiful. I mean, the palace was beautiful.
Oh, well, yeah, it was beautiful, for sure.
That was probably
But the choreography of the fight there wasn't.
Really impacted the training that they had for the fight and the scenes, and it's like, well, if you can have these
Right.
soup scenes and these, like, hey, you're inside of a cell sets, and then they were shooting all the outdoor stuff as well in Northern Ireland. That's why it looks so, like, grassy and sleeping bear dunes, and there's, like, no sand, yet you have these people who have these sigils of suns on their chest and, like, sandy outfits of yellow, and here they are in, like, grassland. It doesn't mesh.
It's unreliable narration.
They should have just gone to a beach somewhere.
The two Dorns is a great example of the sort of Cartesian dualism of the show and the books, I think.
you guys are real reaching.
Oh, yes. One warged the other. I had one question for this post. The user Fire and Salty makes the point that it's Aegon missing that crushes it. But if you had a choice between Aegon, Quentin, and Arianne, and you could have one of those plots back
That's tough.
in the show, which one would you want?
I would say Quentin. I think Quentin makes the most sense because I guess the show opted for the route that Dorne and Daenerys will ally in season 7, it seems like, or at the end of season 6 even.
Mm-hmm.
But I like the dynamic better of what I really thought when season 5 kicked off was that Trystane, since we knew that Quentin wasn't going to come, and I read the theory that Trystane was secret Aegon. Didn't buy it. Secret Aegon. Didn't really buy it, but I liked it. But I thought that Dora Martell was going to dispatch Trystane out to Marine to try and grab Daenerys and bring her back, and that would have been an interesting dynamic that would have captured some of what the books are going for with a Dorne Daenerys conflict that looks like it's going to rear its ugly head in Winds or in Dream. That's interesting to me. Don't know. I mean, I really like Arianne's point of view character and her
I'm
arc.
surprised they didn't bring in Arianne.
Arianne's is great.
Marine in season 5 and 6 is its whole other story, and you can do it without having Quentin there. I think what I would be looking for is, like, what can you do to help pick up Dorne? And the Aegon plot seems like it's a whole lot of stuff to get into for the rest of the show, where it would take a whole nother season to do all that. But I think if you have Arianne there in Dorne, it helps elevate that story enough to make it work within the context of season 5 and season 6. So Arianne would be my pick of which one I would most like to have back. I think it's a good assist in the story that is the weakest.
Yeah, as much as I love Quentin, yeah.
Building off the way HBO, like, established Game of Thrones at the beginning as, like, tits and dragons and blood. Like, how did they not include Arianne? She was just, like, her storyline was made for HBO.
Yeah,
like,
this is why not?
She's busty. She like has and like
she is she's HBO.
I think she had like an interesting storyline, and plus on top of all that, like she also has that storyline where there would be blood and violence because of her actions. I just can't believe that.
Yeah.
Of all the characters, she was cut.
You could literally sum up her story with tits and dragons. Like, that's most of her plot so far is tits and then going to Aegon.
You know, my really hot take about Dorne in the show is that they should have just abandoned it altogether. If they weren't going to do Aegon, if they weren't going to do Arya, if they weren't going to do Quentyn, if they weren't going to do a foil to the Sand Snakes being Ilaria, then they should have just dropped Dorne altogether and focused on the Iron Islands and pushed the Kingsmoot back to season 5, and then had that whole sequence drive the plot forward. So you have Euron introduced more earlier, so he becomes a more pivotal character. Yeah. But that's really my take on it.
That's a whole nother bag of
snakes. Oh
my god! A part of the reason the Dorne plot doesn't make sense is there's like no future in it for Duran. Without Arya, without Quentyn, without Aegon as like somebody to ally with, it's like he's just going crazy with revenge with like no long game, and that's a big part of Duran. He's trying to win. He's not just trying to kill everybody. They removed his win conditions.
Yeah, without it, Duran just seems hungry like a wolf.
As a side note, my partner can hear me talking about this, and he just sent me a chat that says, "Hiss with me, sisters." That's included in this.
Man, he's great.
Excellent.
That guy.
Say hi to Obi-Wan. That about wraps it up for our subreddit highlights of the last month or so. Now, with the show coming down the pike, we wanted to spend some time talking about some specific aspects of the show that Game of Thrones is unique in, or does better, or at least differently than other shows on TV. So we're going to spend some time talking about show production.
Did you say coming down the pike? Because Euron's more in the show now? Greyjoy's featured.
Yes.
Whoa! No!
I think it's a good fun.
No!
Jeff, what was that?
Puns are assaulting my ears.
Salting your ears like the salt of the Greyjoy ships?
Oh my gosh.
Oh, and then maybe there's smoke somewhere from his anger?
From this super hot fire.
Are you Azor Ahai, sir?
I'm going to turn the fan on in my house and have you edit
in your
all
mouse?
the fan noise out. House.